What's going on, guys? In today's video, it's going to be all about tournament fishing and specifically how to translate those really productive practice days into your actual tournament results. There's a lot of things I've learned over the past 10 years in my personal tournament fishing, and really specifically in the past 2 or 3 years, that has really elevated my consistency in tournaments no matter where I go. So I want to share 3 topics with you, so hopefully in today's video you'll learn a thing or two and maybe be able to apply it to your next tournament. Y'all stay tuned, let's jump into it. Alright guys, let's go ahead and jump into the first topic, and that's going to be how not to over practice for a tournament. And what I mean by that is not getting too dialed on one specific deal where you spend the entire tournament trying to force those fish and really catch fish that are not there because they were there the week or the days prior to the tournament. Now, what I like to do personally is once I establish a pattern, I'll run a couple of different spots, catch fish doing that. Say I'm throwing a crankbait on secondary points. Once I consistently get bit on that, I'll often leave that pattern and just go and look for the similar areas that I would fish in the tournament and not actually fish for them. This does a couple things for me. It first allows me not to beat up on fish and catch them and save them for the tournament, but it also allows me to run new water in the tournament, and that's been something in the past few years that has really elevated my consistency in tournament fishing, is scrapping what I've done in practice and being able to run completely new water in the tournament. It's a little bit scary at first, but once you kind of understand what those fish are setting up on and locations they should be, pulling into areas you've never even set your boat down into has been an extreme key in my personal fishing. Like I was saying, these fish are always moving. They're rarely ever in the same areas, and being able to just kind of get an idea where those fish should be and what kind of baits they're eating, that's what I'm primarily trying to target in practice. I really don't like to get too specific on things, and I like to develop patterns inside the actual tournament and follow these fish in the event rather than trying to just run holes where I've caught them on the days previous. So that's one thing to definitely keep in mind that might help you out in the water, because a few years ago I'd always catch a really big fish at the end of the tournament or find an extremely productive area in the last hour just by pulling in somewhere I've never fished in my entire life. And these past few years I've kind of been able to scrap that as early as 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and realize that these fish are not eating the same baits. They're not in these same areas that I found them in. Let's go try something new. And when you have an entire day to just break down those fish and patterns and what they are doing for the actual tournament, it's been a huge success for me to not get so caught up on where they have been or what they have been eating and really follow those fish in the actual event. So that's definitely something to consider when you're in a tournament and things are just not going your way. You can't get bit on anything you had previously. Don't be scared to just pick up the trolling motor, go try something new, look on the map and understand where you have been getting bit and just try some new water. So something to consider. That'd be my first tip of advice, to be a little bit more consistent in tournaments. Alright guys, so the second topic for tournament fishing is to keep an open mind in both your baits and locations when you are in the tournament. And what I mean by that is, if you're getting bit on a really specific deal, say it's a crankbait on secondary rock points, and all of practice you've been catching really big fish across the lake just running these isolated secondary points, and during the tournament you're trying this, it's not working. So having a different array of baits on your deck is something I do, and I always put a couple maybes on the deck. And what I mean by that is I have a couple of the baits I really think I'm going to catch them on, and then the night before, the day before the tournament, I'll put a couple baits that I potentially could think would work. For example, this past week out on Lake Lanier, I was catching a lot of fish on a shaky head and a jig, and I noticed a lot of these fish were spitting up some pretty big crawfish. So the night before the tournament, I actually put on a crankbait. Hadn't caught a fish on it all week, but during the tournament I pulled it out and caught the biggest fish of the day on it. Hadn't thrown a crankbait all week, but just kind of felt right. So definitely having a couple of those maybes on the deck where you have a kind of gut feeling to what they might eat, or just something you think would be a good addition to having on your front deck, has been something I've done and it's really paid off for me a lot. And just having a couple extra of those options on your deck ready to go can make a big difference in your fishing. I'm not personally saying have 20 or 30 rods with a bunch of different baits on it. I'm just saying, for me, I have a couple of the baits I really think I'm going to catch them on, and then maybe 2 or 3 other baits that I potentially could think would work during the tournament. So definitely having an open mind in your baits and your locations will pay huge dividends in your tournament fishing and give you a lot of edge on other people that get stuck in their ways and just keep running that same water and pattern that they had been catching them on. So that's definitely one thing to keep in mind, is be versatile in your baits and your locations during the tournament. And if it's not working out, just keep moving and keep searching, and more times than not, you'll be able to find them on that given day. Alright guys, the third and final category that has really helped me in tournaments is finding a productive area and really maximizing that. And what I mean by that is, if you have an area where you know these fish are at and you know they feed at some point during the day, being versatile in your baits and really just staying in that area and breaking it down to its full potential has paid huge dividends for me. And just knowing that those fish are in that area, rather than me trying to run across the lake and try 100 different things, staying in one area and trying different techniques and really maximizing those fish in that area. For example, I had a grass flat in Florida a couple years ago. I was catching those fish really good on a chatterbait. They shut down for me, but I knew those fish were still somewhere in this one little area. So I really picked up a worm and I was able to break down those isolated pieces of hydrilla and get those same fish to eat, even though they weren't feeding on baits I'd caught them on in practice. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, is if you know there's fish in an area, you know they're the right fish, don't be scared to stay there and try a couple different things and really spend your time in an area, whether that means switching from a power technique to something a little bit more finesse or vice versa. Keep an open mind and don't be scared to just really maximize that one specific area, because oftentimes you'll find spots within the spots. And what I mean by that is, if you have isolated grass mat, for example, you know there's fish in there, they quit biting, you know they're somewhere in there, and you'll oftentimes find little zones inside of that one area that you can catch more fish out of that you didn't even know were there when you found it in practice. So that's definitely one more thing to keep in mind when you are tournament fishing. So to wrap things up, if y'all keep an open mind, be extremely versatile on your baits and locations, maybe run a little bit new water in your next tournament and not get so caught up on where those fish were or where they have been and what they were eating the couple of days before, I bet in your next tournament you'll have a lot better results, just because you kept an open mindset and developed a pattern during the actual tournament. It's definitely a little bit scary at first to just kind of pull the plug and start something completely fresh in the actual tournament, but all of my tournaments that I've done really well in the past few years, that's often the case, where I get an idea of what those fish are doing and I go and build on it during the tournament, and I really get honed in on that certain day to a specific pattern in the tournament. So that's just a couple things to think about. Hopefully moving into y'all's next tournament, maybe a couple of those tips will help you. See y'all in the next video. If this helps you in any way, please leave a like and subscribe, and we'll see y'all in the next one.